The day I realized my children had already moved on did not come with anger or shouting. There were no slammed doors, no loud arguments, and no dramatic scenes, like I had imagined in my worst fears. It came quietly, like a shadow slipping across the floor, unnoticed until it had settled completely. I remember that morning clearly. I was in my kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. Outside, the sun was rising, but inside, the house felt heavy, silent, almost empty. My daughter-in-law looked at me that morning and said, politely, "Ummi, we will be late tonight. Don't wait for dinner." Her voice was calm, ordinary, but beneath it, there was a distance I could feel. I smiled. "Of course," I said. I nodded as if everything was fine. And on the surface, it was. But inside, I felt a little shift, a quiet ache that I could not yet name. I had been waiting for many nights like this one, waiting for small conversations, for laughter, for signs that they still wanted me around. My children had grown so busy with their lives that the house felt bigger and emptier with every passing day. And that morning, I realized slowly that the emptiness was not accidental. It was the quiet way my children had begun leaving me behind. I am a mother of 3, 2 sons and 1 daughter. I raised them all in this same house. Every room has a story. Their first steps were on the living room carpet. Their school uniforms were lined up carefully by the door. Their first arguments and reconciliations, their childhood laughter, it all lived here. I had been a quiet mother, not a loud one. I believed in patience, in listening, and in teaching for example, rather than by raising my voice. Their father worked long hours, so most days it was just me at home, caring for the children, preparing meals, cleaning, and keeping everything in order. I took pride in that life. I told myself that one day my children would remember these small acts of care. But life moves fast, and children grow. They grow into their own world, sometimes forgetting that the home they leave behind is still alive with memories of them. My daughter married first. She moved to another city, leaving an emptiness that could not be replaced. I tried to call her more often, to hear about her life, to feel connected. She called back sometimes, not often, and I understood. Life changes. It is not a betrayal, it is just life. Then my eldest son married. His wife moved in, and at first, I was happy. The house was alive again. New voices, new routines, new life. I gave them space. I told myself not to interfere. I wanted them to be happy. But little by little, the life I had known in this house began to slip away. Meals were eaten separately. Conversations were clipped. Silence grew longer and louder, pressing on me, weighing me down. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. Parents must learn to step back. But even as I said this, I felt something changing inside me. A quiet grief I could not yet put into words. Evenings were the hardest. The smell of dinner cooking, the empty chairs at the table, the unanswered questions, it all made me wonder, had I failed somewhere? Had I been invisible without realizing it? I would watch the clock, expecting footsteps, voices, the sound of keys in the door. But most nights, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I began to notice other things too. Birthdays passed quietly, small celebrations replaced by polite phone calls. Holidays were subdued, polite gatherings instead of laughter-filled chaos. My daughter-in-law would politely remind me to stay out of certain routines. My son did not seem to notice. The walls of my home seemed to grow taller and more silent, like a museum, preserving memories rather than a living home. I tried to stay busy. Gardening, small crafts, reading. I prayed a little more. I talked to neighbors occasionally. But deep down, there was a growing ache. The house was alive, yes, but not for me. It had become a place where I existed, but not really belonged. And even in my quiet patience, I began to realize life moves on for everyone except those who wait. One day, as I watched them laugh together over something I had not heard about, something small and ordinary, I felt the first real stab of understanding. My children had begun leaving me, little by little, in ways that were so small I almost did not notice. A smile that did not reach my eyes. A meal eaten without sharing. A story told without inviting me. And the day I realized it fully, the house was quiet, and I felt more alone than I had in years. The distance between us did not arrive suddenly. It arrived in whispers, in glances, in moments that seemed unimportant at first. But over time, these small absences piled up, creating an emptiness that became impossible to ignore. I remember one evening asking my son softly, "Are you coming home for dinner?" He paused, looked at me briefly, and said, "We already ate." No further explanation. I nodded and retreated to my own room, my heart sinking in silence. Another evening, I cooked his favorite dish, hoping for some shared laughter or a small conversation. He smiled politely, but barely touched it. I ate in silence. I told myself it was nothing. Perhaps they were busy. Perhaps I was imagining the emptiness. But the house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had once vibrated with life. I began noticing other things. Holidays were polite. Birthdays were small. Conversations happened over text rather than across the kitchen table. One night, I overheard my daughter-in-law saying quietly, "We need our own space." My son said nothing. That silence spoke louder than any words could. At first, I tried to fill the emptiness with routine. I would cook, clean, and pray. I kept the house perfect, as if it could somehow remind them of love, of care, of the home they had left behind. But slowly, I realized that no amount of effort could bring back the closeness that had faded. Sometimes, I would sit by the window, watching families pass by, holding hands, laughing, sharing small joys. I wondered if I had failed somewhere. Had I raised them wrong? Was it my fault that they had grown so distant? I began to sleep early, wake early, do everything quietly so as not to disturb. I ate alone more often, told myself I liked the quiet. But silence can be loud when it becomes your only companion. I tried to talk to them. I tried to ask about their day, their lives, their dreams. But the answers were clipped, polite, and distant. They had lives of their own, and I was no longer a part of them in the way I had hoped. Even small gestures were no longer for me. I once bought a cake for my daughter-in-law's birthday, thinking it would be a happy surprise. She smiled politely, thanked me, and placed it in the fridge for later. I realized then that the warmth of shared moments was slowly being replaced by politeness, courtesy, and distance. The breaking point came on a rainy evening. The smell of wet earth and damp walls filled the house. I had cooked dinner, as usual, hoping that maybe tonight would be different. But the food remained untouched. Hours passed. My son came home late, looking tired. I asked softly, "Did you eat?" "Yes," he replied, without elaboration. I nodded. Then came the words I was not prepared for. "Ami, we are thinking of moving." The room felt smaller. The walls pressed in. I did not know how to respond. I wanted to ask where, why, when, but my voice would not come. I spent that night crying quietly, not loudly, just tears on my pillow and long hours of thinking. I realized then, fully, that they were not leaving the house alone. They were leaving me. I went through the next few days in a fog. I packed some of their things, carefully, thinking of memories, stories, and small tokens of their childhood. I found old school projects, tiny shoes, letters I had written them in the past. Each object carried a memory, a love, a life we had shared. The emotional ache was heavy. I could not speak much. I could not smile naturally. I wandered through the rooms, imagining laughter that no longer existed here. Sometimes I talked to myself softly, telling myself it would be okay, that life moves on, that children grow, that parents must learn to let go. After they moved, the house became quiet in a way that was unfamiliar. Every room echoed. Every corner held a memory that now seemed like a ghost. I learned to eat alone, to speak less, to move slowly through the day without expecting interaction. But slowly, I began to understand something important. Love does not disappear. It changes shape. It becomes quieter. It no longer demands attention, but it remains. I started calling my daughter more often. I wrote letters to my sons. I prayed more. I found solace in routines that reminded me I was still alive, still capable of joy, still capable of love. I realized that waiting for someone else to fill your heart with love is not living. Learning to stand still, to find joy in small things, to breathe in memories without clinging, this is living. I started finding peace in the quiet. The sun through the windows, the smell of flowers in the garden, the sound of rain against the roof. These small things reminded me that life continues, even when children leave. Now, when I sit alone, I do not feel forgotten. I feel older, yes. Wiser, perhaps, but not abandoned. I have learned that children leaving is not a sign of failing love. It is a part of life. They grow, they build their own worlds. They create their own routines. And parents must learn to watch quietly, to let go, to love from the distance. If you are listening to my story, remember this. Cherish your parents while you can. And if you are a parent like me, learn to let go gently. Love does not end when children move on. It only becomes quieter, gentler, wiser. Quiet love is the strongest kind.